Okay, welcome everybody to this community meeting hosted by Globeville First. My name is LJ Suzuki. I am your neighbor and the president of the Neighborhood Association Globeville First. Bienvenidos a todos a esta junta de Globeville First. Soy su vecino y el presidente de Globeville First, LJ Suzuki. Thank you. If you could please make sure that you stay muted during this meeting. If you're not talking, there will be opportunities for questions and answers later on. I'd like to thank the City of Denver for helping coordinate and communicate this meeting. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Anthony Aragon, who will explain the Spanish interpretation options. Gracias a la Ciudad de Denver para la ayuda de comunicar esta junta a nuestra colonia. Ahorita Anthony Aragon va a explicar las opciones de interpretación.
Thank you, LJ. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Globeville First Neighborhood Association meeting. We're glad you're here. We do have Spanish interpretation available this evening. So for interpretation, please connect using a tablet or a computer. And on the bottom of your screen, you will see a globe icon. It's on the bottom right of your screen. And you do need to select the language of your preference. Even if you want to listen in English, you do need to select English as your language of choice. And if you do would like interpretation, please select Spanish.
Buenas noches a todos. Queremos darle la bienvenida a esta reunión de la Asociación Vecinal de Globeville. Es un placer informarles que esta es una reunión bilingüe y tenemos interpretación al español para poder optar por esa opción. Si hace el favor de pulsar en el globo a mano en la parte posterior derecha de su pantalla y seleccionar el idioma de su preferencia. Tanto las personas de habla inglesa como las de como los que hablan español deben de seleccionar uno de los dos idiomas para recibir la interpretación. Gracias.
Just in general guidelines, for those of you that have not been in Zoom community meetings before, as I said earlier, we ask that you stay on mute while you're not speaking so we do not get any sound interference, like maybe the baby you hear screaming in the background of my sound. If we get to the questions and answers period, you are welcome to type a question into the chat box. That chat box is going to be located in that same lower bar where you selected your language. You can put a question in there at any time, and each speaker will have at least 5 minutes at the end of their presentation to answer any questions. We will also be providing contact information for each of the speakers so that you can ask them follow-up questions via email if you'd like. I'm going to begin by telling you a little bit about Globeville First and why we're having this meeting. Change is here in Globeville. Some of it is good and some of it is bad. At Globeville First, we believe that positive development can occur for the neighborhood. That means development that benefits existing residents, reduces pollution, makes our streets safer and easier to navigate, and gives us access to amenities that we need. We achieve this vision by working with developers and the city in assertive negotiation, not against them through unreasonable demands. We believe Globeville can become better by channeling public and private development towards our needs rather than being combative and uncooperative. Globeville First is a young organization, but we already have made some headway. Recently, we secured a grant for $240,000 to plant trees throughout the Globeville neighborhood. So stay tuned for your opportunity to get free trees for your property. You may have also noticed that the Lincoln Street underpass is cleaner than last year, although still not as clean as we prefer. This was achieved through Globeville First's direct advocacy through City Hall and through the Department of Transportation to get that maintained and get pigeon spikes installed. In general, we are advocating for the city services that we deserve. You may have attended our 2019 meeting where we hosted Mayor Hancock at the Holy Transfiguration Church. By hosting community meetings like those and this one that you're in right now, we create a voice for Globeville inside of City Hall. The purpose of today's meeting is to inform you about 4 major projects that are happening in Globeville. The first we'll discuss is the Globeville Mobility Projects, which you may have already attended an initial meeting for. And now Riley, a city planner, is going to be explaining some design ideas that he has for Lincoln Street and 51st Street. Next, we're going to be talking about a few other private developments and listening to the developers themselves. One is the Fox Park development in the West Globeville area. Another one is 4995 Washington Street, which is currently being rezoned by the city for public development. And then the third one, you probably know, the Salvation Army site, which currently is in design phases as well. Additionally, at the end, we'll get an update on the National Western Center development, which you're probably also already aware of. We will have time to ask questions to all the speakers today, although our time is limited, so we might not get to all of the questions. We are providing contact info to every speaker so you can follow up directly with them. If you care about Globeville and want to stay connected to these projects and others that are happening, we encourage you to come to a Globeville First meeting. Meetings occur every other Tuesday and are open to the public. You can find out more by emailing globevillefirst@gmail.com or by joining our mailing list and clicking on the link that I'm about to put in the chat box. This will take you to an online form where you can submit your email address, and we will send you our newsletters to keep you informed. Before I hand this off to our first speaker, I just want to put a reminder out to people that were late. Please be sure to select the language of your choice so that you get the right interpretation options. This selection can be done through the Zoom bar. And so make sure to make that selection of either English or Spanish. Si esta batalla esta junta necesita seleccionar su idioma en Zoom. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, which is Riley Lamy, a city planner with the City of Denver, who is going to discuss the mobility projects here in Globeville. Riley?
Thanks, LJ, and thanks so much for having us and having me. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge that Councilwoman Ortega is joining us in the audience. So just wanted to give a shout out to her and say thank you for joining us tonight. We really appreciate everyone who has taken the time out of their evening to join us tonight and talk more about these projects. So as LJ mentioned, I'm here tonight to talk to you and give you an update about 3 important bicycle mobility projects that we recently discussed with you, first back on February 25th. And the purpose of that meeting was to introduce what those projects, kind of just introduce the projects and get your feedback and your ideas of how we could make these streets improve. And so what we're here tonight to talk about is how we've heard your feedback and then also discuss how we have incorporated your feedback into the design of these projects. Next slide, please. So the projects that we're going to talk a little bit about tonight are the Lincoln Street Neighborhood Bikeway, and then we'll talk about the East 51st Avenue bike lane that is a part of the repaving that is planned for the Globeville neighborhood. And then we'll talk about some of the feedback that we heard about on East 45th. And on the next slide, it shows you the project. So again, just on East 51st, North Lincoln Street, and then East 45th. And I have this map here to really show you that these projects are meant to be a part of a larger network that Denver is building to improve bicycle mobility across the entire city. As we're working to not only improve bicycle mobility, we're working to improve connections through transit, we're working to improve, fill sidewalk gaps. And it's obviously a big task to take on. So I just wanted to acknowledge that these projects aren't just happening in this neighborhood, but are also meant to connect to a larger network of projects across the city. So what I'm going to start talking about first is the North Lincoln Street Neighborhood Bikeway. And as a reminder, this project goes from East 44th all the way to East 51st. This is a project that was funded from the Elevate Denver Bond Program, and it was also a part of the Globeville neighborhood plan. So this is a project that was resulted directly out of that. And so as I mentioned earlier, we had a public meeting on February 25th to introduce this project. And we were trying to ask questions and get your feedback about how we can improve bicycle and pedestrian mobility on Lincoln Street in the area that I just mentioned on the map. And so at that meeting, we were able to hear from you both in the chat as well as through the questions that you asked and the feedback that you gave. And we also published a survey that was online where we got some additional responses. And some of the top concerns that we heard was wanting to improve the street to make it safe and comfortable to walk or use a wheelchair or other mobility device. The second largest comment that we heard was making it safer and more comfortable to ride a bicycle. And then the third top concern or top part of the feedback that we heard was reducing the speed of motor vehicles along the corridor. So if you go to the next slide, I'm going to share with you how we've taken some of that feedback into the design that we're proposing. So one of the first things that we are looking at and I'm going to start off at the very south end of the street and I apologize, there's some sirens behind me in the background. So we're going to start at the south end of the street between 44th and 45th. What is being recommended is a pedestrian refuge island, and there's a similar image of that on the image on my screen to the right. And the benefits of that are really to help slow down vehicle speeds and to shorten crossing distance. So again, these are treatments that are proposed to help kind of address that feedback that we heard from you to improve the street for pedestrians and improve the street for bicycles as well. So then on the next slide, we have what are called curb extensions, and those are being recommended underneath the overpass, so underneath I-70. And so those are being recommended on either side of the 46th Avenues. And a curb extension, again, there's an example of that on the screen in the picture. But really what it is it's trying to sort of move the curb out a little bit. And that has the benefit of reducing the speeds of turning vehicles, as well as increasing visibility for pedestrians that are in the intersection. And it also effectively shortens the distance that pedestrians have to cross. So these are really, again, meant to benefit pedestrians as well as bicycles and just overall improve the safety of the street. On the next slide, a couple of more pedestrian refuge islands. So those are being proposed at 47th Avenue as well as 48th. So you'll see those on the screen as well. And as I mentioned before, the benefits are slowing down vehicle speeds, shortening crossing distance. And then also to complement that, we are also proposing additional marked crosswalks on 47th and 49th. And those help to increase visibility. So it helps pedestrians be more visible. It also indicates to drivers that there are pedestrians that are crossing at those intersections. I do want to also mention that this street is planned for repaving, I believe, in 2022. So the intention is that this project would be built a lot during the time that the street is repaved. So some of the other locations where you do have those marked crosswalks, the intention would be that those would get refreshed or improved at that time as well. Then on the next slide, now where we're looking at is from 50th to 51st. So at 50th Avenue, that's where Lincoln Street, it kind of jogs a little bit to the west and then goes up and continues north. So right here, we're also recommending additional bulb outs or curb extensions, as we also call them in our industry, to shorten the crossing distance, to increase visibility, and to reduce the speeds of turning vehicles. So as I mentioned before, the feedback, how we came up with the designs for these was based on the feedback that we heard from you, not just in the survey, but in the meeting. But I do want to emphasize that there's still time to give additional feedback. So if there's something that we missed, we want to be able to incorporate that. So how we're taking your feedback is both from the feedback that you can provide us in the chat tonight, as well as from any questions. But then also we're going to be releasing a survey that asks if these treatments really help to achieve the goals for this street. So on the next slide is where, and actually one more slide, sorry, I forgot that there was one more on here. So some other things that we'll be adding to the neighborhood bikeway is additional signage as well as pavement markings that help people be able to more safely be able to navigate the street. One thing that you'll notice is that there isn't a marked bike lane, so there isn't an actual bike lane. That's because what a neighborhood bikeway is it's really intended to be more of a shared street between pedestrians and bicycles. So people are expected to share the street, and the designs are encouraged to slow down vehicle speeds and really make it so that it can be a shared option. So as I mentioned, there is a survey where we will be collecting your feedback on what is currently proposed on Lincoln Street. And so that survey is now live and online, and that's April 29th through May 21st that the survey will be available. So it is both in English and in Spanish, and that's bit.ly/Lincoln Bikeway. And we'll also put that in the chat as well. And then the Spanish version is bit.ly Lincoln's Cyclovia. So just wanted to make sure that everyone can see that those both are in the chat, and we do encourage you to provide your feedback. So I'm going to pause there real quick just in case there are any questions. And I have a couple of colleagues that have joined me that are going to help ask any questions that have come up in the chat.
So we do have a question with regards to the extensions on the corners. How does that impact people with disabilities and who are using wheelchairs?
So just to clarify, that's a great question, Nora. So to clarify that these right now will be built, or when they're built, they'll likely be built either using paint or post materials. So someone, for example, that was crossing the street in a wheelchair or in a mobility device would still cross using the curb ramp like they do today, and so won't change from that perspective.
Great. We also actually have a question from somebody named Central 70 Project who indicated that they had a question, but didn't put it in the chat. And I'm wondering if they might want to unmute themselves and ask the question in person. Well, while we're waiting for that, maybe I'll ask a question from Christy Carter regarding vehicle speeds and how these treatments assist in reducing vehicle speeds.
Yeah, so what I showed you was a couple of different things. I showed some curb extensions, and then we also showed the pedestrian refuge islands. So what these are intended to generally do, based on our research and our studies, those combination of things like that, the bulb outs and the pedestrian refuge islands have the impact of narrowing the street. And anytime that the street is narrowed, it helps to discourage speeding. The curb extensions also have the effect of slowing down turning vehicles. And that's sometimes, as a pedestrian, where we sometimes will see crashes happen is from a turning vehicle that's going too fast and doesn't see a pedestrian. So the curb extensions work to help slow down those turning movements.
Thanks.
And there are other things that we can consider in the future as well to slow down speeds that we may show or may propose when we come back a second time. So this is, we're still very early stages in the design for this project. And so I do want to indicate that we will be coming back either in the summer or the fall to present an updated design that's based on the feedback that you guys have provided.
We do have a question from Councilwoman Ortega too regarding parking and if any of these treatments result in the removal of parking, particularly in front of businesses.
So for a neighborhood bikeway, because it's a shared street, and what that, again, what it means is that the improvements are primarily focused on the intersection. It's not a dedicated space for bicycles. And so as a result, the parking for the most part is left as it is today. The only time that parking might be impacted is at the very corner of the street where we would pull back the kind of no parking setback in order to provide, or in order to increase visibility at like stop signs. But other than that, then the parking is generally not impacted.
Okay. We do also have a question from Rob concerning the definition of a neighborhood bikeway. That it is a shared street between pedestrians and bicycles, but that isn't sort of the experience on the 35th Avenue neighborhood bikeway. And I guess the question is, has the terminology changed? I think that probably refers to the fact that it's really shared between cyclists, pedestrians, and autos.
Yeah, so the reason why we have a lot of different terms for bikeways. So we have our bike lanes that are dedicated space for bikes. We have our trails that are considered bikeways that are shared by pedestrians and bicycles. We have protected bike lanes like some of the ones that you see downtown. The reason why it's called a neighborhood bikeway is even though it is intended to be shared by bicycles and vehicles and pedestrians, it's called that because from a network perspective, the goal of the project is to slow down vehicle speeds. And so, and to make it so that you would be comfortable riding as a cyclist or walking as a pedestrian. And a lot of these benefits also benefit people driving as well, just because they make the street safer. So the reason why we call it a neighborhood bikeway is really, again, just because from a network perspective, these kinds of treatments are helping to make the street more friendly for people riding bikes, even though they do benefit those other modes.
And this question is somewhat related from Christy. These roadways, Lincoln, it's already very narrow and difficult to drive on. And I guess that the question being, how does this impact the driver who uses that street?
So what we're looking at, and I want to be clear that we're not narrowing most of the street. It's only in particular intersections. And so you'll still be able to drive on it just like you do today. It's again, just really just the improvements at the specific intersections are intended so that people don't feel like they should speed on the street. And that's in direct response to one of the top comments that we heard was fast speeds happening on the street.
Well, I think that about wraps it up for the questions regarding Lincoln Street.
Great. So I'm going to move on to our next project, which is East 51st. So East 51st is a bike lane. Again, this project also came not only from the Denver Moves Bicycles Plan, but also from the Globeville Plan, or from the Globeville Neighborhood Plan. And this is between Washington Street and Lincoln Street. And it is kind of intended to help connect the rest of that network there. This project is moving on a little bit of a different timeline than the neighborhood bikeway, and that's because parts of the Globeville neighborhood will be repaved this summer, and East 51st will be repaved as well. And so that's actually an opportunity for us to put in the bike lane that was proposed from the Globeville neighborhood plan. So on the next slide, again, just want to talk through timeline. It's really important that we do hear in the chat, and through the email, which we'll give you later on tonight, but that we do hear from you on this project, because this project is a little bit further ahead in the design, just because the paving is happening in the summer. So on the next slide, We did also talk about this project at the February 25th meeting. And we heard quite a few comments. 85% of the comments were related to safety and improving the street safe for everyone. So, you know, a lot of what we talked about from the survey, or what we heard residents say, was that people want better walking infrastructure as well as better comfort, both crossing the street, better sidewalks, filling in the gaps of the sidewalks. We did also hear some concerns about street parking and that it's used for visitor parking. So I did want to highlight that. We also heard just some general comments that were related to vehicles running stop signs, that there's a high volume of traffic on the street. And then another top comment was just improving the street for people riding bicycles and making it safer. So on the next slide, again, just really quickly, just highlighting where some of those comments came from. A lot of them were focused on Lincoln Street, or Lincoln and East 51st. We heard some comments related to North Broadway and 51st, and then some additional comments on Washington and East 51st. Next slide. So just wanted to kind of highlight what is currently being proposed. So for this project, as you'll know today, that there's 2 travel lanes in both directions, and then there's generally a parking lane on either side. So it's a pretty narrow street. So on the next slide, this is the design that has been proposed currently. And I do understand that, or what I want to highlight is, again, a lot of the comments that we got were safety related, improving safety on the street. And sometimes as we're going to try to make changes on the street to improve safety and to add bike infrastructure and add improvements for transit and add improvements for pedestrian, there's trade-offs that are involved with that. So on this street, we don't have room to put a bike lane in and keep the parking on both sides of the street. And so that we would have to repurpose the parking on both sides in order to add that, in order to fit in the bike lane here. So that's why it's really important. I do want to be able to hear your feedback on that tonight, because that is, I understand that those kinds of changes can be difficult. There are benefits, though, that I also want to describe, which are on the next slide here, for putting in the bike infrastructure here. One of them being that, again, a lot of the comments that we heard were about speeding and safety. And that when we put bicycle infrastructure in, it does narrow the roadway, which is proven to slow down vehicle speeds. It also, as many of you know, there's an effort to improve multimodal access on Washington Street, and then a separate project on 51st east of Washington to connect the bridge into the National Western Center, as well as the South Platte River Trail. So with that means that this project is connecting both to those bridges as well as to Lincoln Street. So again, be a network of streets that are more comfortable for bicycles. And I realize that the pedestrian component is just as important. And so this will also complement future sidewalks that are planned for construction on East 51st. And the last time that I was here in February, we gave an update on those sidewalks and intend for them to start construction at some point in the next couple of years. So with that, I want to take some questions on 51st, just assuming that we still have some time here, and pause there.
Yeah, hi, this is Adrian. Can I ask the question, or do I have to write it in?
No, you can ask a question.
Okay, this is Adrian. I live up in North Denver, so this is actually right by my house. So
okay.
I have a couple of questions. The one slide that you showed with the actual bike lane on, where was that? Was that on Washington or 51st?
That was on 51st.
So there's going to be a bike lane, because that's actually, there's a lot of parking on there in the day, but that actually is going to go from Lincoln or from Broadway all the way down to Washington.
So the bike lane will go, yes, from Lincoln Street to Washington.
And then the other bike lane then, would that also be on Lincoln?
Yeah, and sorry, I forgot what I wanted to clarify. The reason why it's showing two different types of bike lanes is because the street gets a little bit wider. And so we're putting in a little bit of, we have room to put in a little bit of a buffer, so that way someone riding a bike isn't right next to moving vehicles.
And then, so that I don't know if you do know, there's a lot of traffic up and down 51st from, I've complained about the traffic and the speeds over the years on the DPD calls, because there is a 4-way stop sign on there at 51st and Lincoln, and actually on 51st on Broadway. And I've complained over the years, and there doesn't seem to be an awful lot they can do, but a lot of semis. And if your bike lanes limit the access of cars or slow the cars down or limit the access of semis, I'm all for it. And I hope that it does, because sometimes in the night it's like a speedway out there. But the semis, that's very heavily traversed with semis from Washington up to Lincoln. And and again, that's one of the things I've asked for over the years, if they will put restricted access for people living in the neighborhood and not for people connecting from Washington to Broadway and trying to get onto I-25. And then the only other question I have is, what is the volume are you expecting for the bikes? I mean, I can't imagine a lot of people coming, there's not a very big slope on the hill, but I can't imagine a lot of people biking up there. But is that going to a bike path down by the river? Is that what you're planning?
So one of the ideas, great question. One of the ideas is that this would eventually connect to the South Platte River Trail. And it's hard to predict the number of bicyclists in the future, partly because sometimes we take the if you build it, they will come philosophy, but also, there might not be a lot of people riding bikes today because they don't feel safe doing so. But then when you add infrastructure for them to do that and then connect to places where people want to go, we'll start to see an increase in them.
It's also worth noting in this image that, right now 51st Street dead ends in that giant park that goes to Heron Pond eventually. But with the National Western Center building the 51st Street Bridge, there's going to be new connectivity there, and that will change traffic patterns.
Okay, I'm sorry, one more question on the bridge. Is that for bikes and cars, that new bridge?
I actually don't know. I'm not super familiar with the bridge itself. I'm going to let Karen Good, if she's on the call, answer that. Otherwise, I believe that there's someone here from the National Western Center that might also.
I'm here for you, Riley.
Thanks, Karen.
Yes, that is a full multimodal bridge. I'm hoping that you guys can hear me and see me, even if the background is a little weird. But yes, that is a full multimodal bridge. It will be for both bikes, pedestrians, and bicycles. I'm sorry, and cars. So one of the original conversations is whether it would also accommodate horses. I'm not quite sure where the horse conversation is now, but it certainly will accommodate bikes, cars, and pedestrians.
And Riley, we did get a couple questions in the chat earlier about the sidewalks, which you mentioned during your presentation, but I'm wondering if you can just revisit, what are the timelines on the sidewalks on 51st Street and other places in Globeville?
Yeah, so I'm going to actually hand that question to Karen as well, who is a lot more familiar with the sidewalk piece of it than I am. Karen, I'll let you unmute yourself if you don't mind.
Not at all. So the question is related to the sidewalks on 51st between Washington and the river. Is that correct?
Yep, and just the general timeline for construction, and if we have an update on that.
And just in general, the whole neighborhood needs sidewalks refreshed. And so if you could just touch on sidewalks in Globeville in general and some concrete timelines.
Sure. Well, was that intended to be a
Upon,
double
yes, it was.
of the concrete sidewalks? So I don't have a specific timeline right now for the sidewalks on 51st between Washington and the river. We are in design right now, but there will need to be some details worked out in terms of easements for construction and whatnot. So I would say that it is at least a year, if not a bit more out. And we will be having, Riley, I'm sorry, I don't know if you've already mentioned this, an open house in May. And we'll have an opportunity for people to dive in and ask some of the project managers of these projects a little bit more detailed questions about some of the projects such as that. So that'll be a great way to get more detailed answers. But I can tell you it's coming soon, but soon is a slightly broader term, in that it is at least a year, if not a bit more out for those sidewalks. And then you had mentioned sidewalks across the board in Globeville, and we do have obviously a larger initiative on sidewalks in Denver as a whole, and Globeville, Elyria, Swansea has a special package within our bond program for sidewalks. So the whole city is got a sidewalk gap program, but Globeville, Elyria, Swansea has a special, I like to think of it as icing on the sidewalk cake of additional support for sidewalks. So what might be good for us to do is to come back and chat with you all in more detail about the sidewalk program when we have that information kind of and all the graphics ready for you. But I also could say that if folks can attend that open house in May, that'll be a great opportunity to talk in more detail about that, because I don't want to take away from our opportunity to get feedback on some of the things that Riley's talking about right now. Is that helpful? Does that at least help quasi answer the question?
Yeah, that's useful for now. So for everybody on the call, this is really a topic we'll revisit, I guess, in that May open house. And at Globeville First, we're going to be following up with Karen to get some concrete timelines on that overall sidewalk package so that we can communicate that out to the residents and make sure that it happens as quickly as possible.
And what I'll say is that when we have specific timelines, we will share those. We don't have them right now. They're a bit broad right now. So as soon as we have more specific timelines, we'll share those, and we'll certainly would really, we are prioritizing those, and we'd like to make sure that you will have the most current information. We just don't have those very specific timelines that'll be most helpful for folks. So we'll get those to you as soon as possible. Always come back to you, but ideally after that open house, so people can see what answers they can get there, and what remaining detail we can cover in person with you all.
Thank you, Karen. And in just wrapping up the questions here for this one specifically, so we can move on to 45th as well. I just wanted to summarize that it looks like a lot of the comments are about that sidewalk and about the additional amenities, and how can the city or Dottie be prioritizing bike lanes when many of the, kind of the other amenities that have been requested for a long time are not there yet. So we recognize that. And the one maybe thing that you can talk about, Riley, that'll address that, and then we can move on, is just Karen talked specifically about sidewalks, but can you talk maybe about the 4 or 5 different types of programs the city has, and how this one with bike paving fits in a little bit more?
Yeah, so there's just a lot of different ways that the projects are being delivered throughout the city. So one of them being the sidewalk program, which is delivering sidewalk. We have the funding for sidewalks in this area that's being delivered through the Elevate Denver bond program. For the bike project, as we mentioned before, the street is being repaved. And so because the street's being repaved, it's an opportunity to put down the bike lanes, because those are just done in paint. So it's a relatively low cost, easy thing to do. But that doesn't mean that those other things like improving crossings or sidewalks that might take a little bit more time aren't happening. They're just on a different timeline, and again, coming from different funding sources, but they are still in the queue. And I realize that we are, I want to go to the next slide real quick, just so that we can, because I know that my time is just about up.
I've had a hand raise. Is there some comment here from some of the community members? I know my name says Dominique on there, but this is Ray G, and I live in Globeville, a fourth generation North Denver resident. I've lived here for a long time. My great grandmother, had a house on Lincoln Street. Now I've been here for a long time, and I appreciate this meeting and involving the community. But there's the priorities of this city regarding infrastructure and what should go in this neighborhood is pretty skewed for people who are, who haven't lived in this community for that long of a time. It seems like their needs are being met a lot quicker than the people who have been here for years and years. We've been asking for sidewalks, and sidewalks are not an amenity. Sidewalks, as far as infrastructure go, are a necessity. Okay, amenities are just extra. And I really, it's a little frustrating that we come to these meetings and the only thing that seems to be on topic is things that are of no use to the folks who actually live here and live in this community. And I'm not saying, hey, it's an open community, we welcome everyone, but when our needs are being, put on the back burner for things that are, to me, unnecessary as of this moment, I just feel like it's a very frustrating thing to continue to hear these promises of just basic needs of the community in order to fulfill the needs of few people. And I understand, hey, bike lanes are fine. I'm not saying I'm against them, but I just feel like the real priority should be the things that we have been struggling to voice over the years. And I mean, we've been to several city council meetings and several of these meetings. And, nothing against you guys. I'm sure you guys are just coming into this project like, hey, or we're just trying to, build something and spend this money. We've been allocated some of these funds for quite a while. So how are you guys going to address that? Is what I'm asking as far as the community goes.
Thanks for those comments. We understand where you're coming from and that it can be frustrating the time that it's taking to get the sidewalk infrastructure in place. And we do agree with you that it's not an amenity, that the sidewalks are a part of essential infrastructure, and that it is being prioritized from the Elevate Denver Bond program to get the sidewalks in place. And we are doing everything that we can to get the sidewalks in where they need to go. And we are going to be continuing to work with this neighborhood to help to be able to help get those sidewalks in. One of the important things, as I mentioned before, is what we're really hearing a lot about is safety as well. And a lot of these bike projects help to benefit safety. And that's another reason why when there's an opportunity to do that, that we'll still pursue that at the same time, even though we're also pursuing sidewalks at the same time. I just really quickly want to or just mention East 45th Avenue. And I know that we're about out of time, so I'm going to kind of skip over the slides. We did ask for some feedback just about how we can improve 45th, or how we can improve mobility on 45th Avenue as well, and ask the community where they prefer to ride a bike if we were to make improvements on 46th, 44th, or 45th. What we largely heard was 45th kind of seems the street that everyone wants to be. And so we're continuing to look into additional options for how we can improve 45th in the future. So on the last slide that I have, just want to remind everyone that you can to take the survey. Again, that's the bit.ly/Lincoln Bikeway. We also realize that we weren't able to get to everyone's questions. So you can email bikes@denvergov.org to be able to get your comments or questions answered. And we try to respond to those as quickly as possible. So again, that's bikes@denvergov.org. So I'm going to hand it back off to LJ and for our next presenter.
Excellent. Thank you, Riley. And thank you everybody for asking your questions. Clearly, sidewalks are a very important thing here in Globeville. And so this is really good guidance for the city as well as for our organization on what priorities to pursue. There was mentioned these open houses that are going to be happening in May. So there's some information on here. And as we circulate the slides after this meeting, you'll have that to follow up with. Our next presenter.
Can I say one thing on sidewalks just to help folks understand a little bit about the challenge in
Yes, but please keep it brief because I don't want to cut into the other presenters' time.
Absolutely. So just quickly, I don't like not being able to give you guys specific timelines, and I know that's really frustrating to you. And the reason that it's challenging to give specific timelines is that sidewalks are at the transition between public and private right-of-way, and we need to work with private property owners sometimes when we're dealing with sidewalks. So we need to make sure that we allow the right amount of, we allow time to work with private property owners. So that's why I know it's frustrating, but we need to make sure that we're communicating individually with private property owners, residents, et cetera, to make sure that we're coordinating with them and giving the time for those conversations. So as we get those conversations going, we will be able to give more specific timelines. So I just wanted to share that with you because I know it's really frustrating and I'm very sorry.
Okay, thank you, Karen. So for the next 4 presenters, they're going to be much shorter presentations. It's just going to be 5-minute presentation with 5 minutes of question and answer available for them. And we're going to start with Jennifer Siegel around 4995 Washington Street. So Jennifer, take it away and just let me know when you want to advance the slide.
Okay, well, go ahead and next slide, please. Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Siegel. I am a housing development officer with Department of Housing Stability. It's also known as HOST at the city. I'm here to share the RFP process for 4995 Washington. As you may or may not know, the site was acquired in 2019 by the city using HUD funding called Community Development Block Grant Funds. This particular funding source requires that the subsequent use at that site serves households at or below 80% of the area median income. And I can give you some more background area median income, but that's it's a HUD definition, and HUD sets area median incomes every year. Currently, the site's in the rezoning process. HOST is the applicant for the rezoning. And we're requesting a rezoning from IMX3 to GMS5, which is like general urban, Main Street, 5 stories. Once that rezoning occurs, we intend on issuing a request for proposal, and I'm going to share a little bit more about this process. The overall process is going to model one that we did in the East Colfax neighborhood, particularly 8315 East Colfax, and I'll discuss that in shortly. Next slide. So we intend on issuing just a comprehensive request for proposal to select a development partner. And here you can see an overview of our proposed development timeline. Some of these timelines are assuming some funding is secured once a development partner is selected. But once the RFP is issued, we'll provide a response time of approximately 6 to 8 weeks. We expect to issue this RFP in June. That's the plan. I don't intend on pushing it back, but the plan is for June. So once that response time, with 6 to 8 weeks, we expect the closing date of the RFP for the respondents will be mid to late summer, but no later than August. That selected respondent will be notified approximately in October, and negotiations regarding the disposition of the land will likely be completed probably by March of 2022, by the following year. That once we have those negotiations complete, that provides the site control that the respondent will need to apply for funding, including one of the primary funding for affordable. Oh, excuse me, sorry about that. I apologize. So one of the primary funding sources is low-income housing tax credits, and but an application for that requires site control. So that site control will be negotiated with the city once that development partner is selected. And once funding is secured, the expectation would be that probably sometime in 2023, there would be the financial closing that the developer would have to complete, and construction can start. And again, these are assuming that the respondent can secure the various financing sources that are required. And in an ideal world, if all of that goes smoothly, then construction could be complete and lease up could begin sometime in late 2024. Next slide, please. So this process is really modeled after what we did at 8315. There will be a review panel that will include city staff with expertise in housing finance, site development, and land use. Additionally, 3 community representatives will be selected through an application process. And I expect to be able to issue that application later next month. And those community members will participate on the review panel as non-voting members. So as you can see from these discussions, the review process is very technical to ensure that the selected proposal meets the requirements of the RFP and can be completed in a timely fashion. Next slide, please. So as I said, the proposal process is modeled after one that we had used on East Colfax. At 8315 East Colfax, the RFP process was used to select Mercy Housing as a developer, and they're moving forward with rental development that will serve households with a wide variety of incomes, as well as an early childhood education center on the ground floor. So we're modeling this process similar to that, but of course, focus on the community priorities for Globeville. Next slide, please. And finally, during community listening sessions that occurred in February and August, hosts captured some community priorities, including the desire for both rental and home ownership at the site, units that serve larger size families, so larger size units, 2, 3, and 4 bedrooms, and units and meet a wide variety of income levels. Additionally, community uses were desired by the community, including potentially a grocery store, fresh food market, perhaps a small business incubator, childcare, and a nonprofit shared space. So those were just some examples that were heard during the community listening session. So, our expectation is that we don't, in our process, we wouldn't prescribe uses. We would offer these community priorities and allow for the developer to come, the respondents to come back with creative proposals to be evaluated. So happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Jennifer. There are some questions in the chat. One of them is if there's an opportunity for community benefit agreement prior to the rezoning.
Well, I would have to check with the CPD rep I'm working with on the rezoning. So we're the applicant. I will have to check that. But unfortunately, I know that we're into the process, and the community meeting is at the May 17th council session. But I will follow up on that question.
Maybe kind of related to that or in the same vein, there's a question about whether the community will have input into the RFP, into the selection or, how that will look.
Well, we will have 3 community members participating as non-voting members, but providing community input on the responses. So that application will be issued and we'll ensure that it has wide reach. So three community members can provide input on the responses.
Councilwoman Ortega asked if the library is still being considered for this site.
I think there's discussions of that. I know that's a funding question. That's part of a broader funding question. So there are definitely discussions on that. So it depends on when that funding would be available.
And Councilwoman Ortega, the latest I heard is it's kind of contingent on some federal funding that's going through Congress right now. So leave it to Washington, D.C., I guess, to see whether that funding comes through or not.
Mm-hmm.
That's my understanding as well, LJ.
There was a question about the Kofax property that this is being modeled after. I'm wondering if you could maybe just put that address into the chat box so that the viewers could research it and see what the results of that were.
Yeah, and what I can also do, what I've done previously, and I'm not sure if I should send it to you, LJ, but actually send that RFP out to the community. Now, again, that was specific to that neighborhood, but for community members to understand what it looks like, how community priorities are communicated in the RFP. So it's 8315, and I'll put that in the chat. And I'll also get the RFP that had been issued several years ago. So, so the community can get a sense of what it looks like.
Great. And I think just in general, some of these comments are related to the non-voting status of the 3 community members. What power or authority do we have in this process? Or it almost feels like a bit of a farce to have us as non-voting members on this committee.
Well, the scoring process is highly technical. So, ensuring that it's a financially feasible project, ensuring that it fits, the requirements of the zoning code. So a lot of that aspect is highly technical and requires the technical expertise. While those members are non-voting, they will have clear influence and input on the community desires and and what they see in those responses. I think there's also very specific procurement rules with the city that would preclude having outside members in that procurement process. So I can look up those very specific rules, but that's part of it as well. The procurement rules also may not allow just outside parties participating.
Great. And I think Angela's got a question on the phone.
Yes, thank you, LJ. Hi, my name is Angela Garcia. I'm a Globeville resident for 50 years. I live in South Globeville. And I would like to know, how are the 3 members going to be selected to be on the RFP panel? And will they be specifically from Globeville?
Absolutely, yes. They are specific to the neighborhood, live, work, own a business within the neighborhood. The application process will describe, it's going to be describe why you want to participate and your connections to the neighborhood. So it is specific, and only neighborhood members or neighborhood business owners will be selected as those 3 community members.
Great. Well, I know we could talk about this for a long time, but unfortunately I do need to move on to the other presenters. Thank you, Jennifer, for taking the time. If you do have follow-up questions, Jennifer's email address is on here, and she is willing to take those questions via email. So feel free to contact her. For those on the phone, it's jennifer.siegel, SIEGEL @denvergov.org. Also, just a quick reminder, if this type of information is interesting to you, if you want to stay up to date with what's happening in Globeville, you want to have a voice and you want to give feedback to these, to the city and to developers the way we are tonight, please join our mailing list. You can contact us, globevillefirst@gmail.com, or you can sign up for our newsletter using the link that's in the chat, and that's also on the screen here. With that, I'm happy to welcome our next presenter, Manuel Jimenez with Pure Development, who is going to be talking about the Fox Park development. Manuel?
Hi, LJ. It's actually Kim tonight.
Oh,
I
Kim, you made
apologize
it.
to everyone. Yes, well, yeah, LJ knows I had my second COVID shot and I'm not feeling well. So I am a last minute stand-in for Manuel. He sends his apologies. As he was waiting to speak tonight, he had a family emergency come up. And so I'm just going to try my best to fill in for him. We're only speaking for a short time tonight, but plan to engage with you all further. And he and Jose Caradano McCadden, who are the principals of the project, are looking forward to meeting you. So as you can see on the slide, the parcel under consideration is actually on the other side of I-25 from all the other projects you have been talking about tonight. Many people refer to this area of Globeville as Fox Park, Fox Island. And so we have taken that vernacular. I don't know if people like it, but sometimes we refer to it as Fox Island as well. This project is at the former Denver Post printing press facility. I think that you are all familiar with the site. It's been vacant for a very long time, and Jose and Manuel are looking forward to bringing it back to life as a new neighborhood area. So this is about 41 acres in size. And what really has been happening over the past several months is working to engage with community groups. We've had about 15 meetings with various community folks, including Globeville First, the GES Coalition, the Sunnyside United Neighbors. And we also mailed a postcard and flyered the whole area that's referred to as the island and held a meeting with folks who live close by. Our hope is to do the same thing for Globeville to the east of I-25 sometime in the next month, be looking for a flyer from us, inviting you to a meeting where we can give you a lot more detail and get more input from you on this project. I think the most important thing, so the project itself is a mixture of housing, office space, and it's a rehabilitation of the old printing press facility. So that building will actually stay. There will be some demolition, but it will come back to life as a community and cultural center. You may have read in the paper that the World Trade Center intends to locate here, and that is the part of the development where they will be housed. Something I think that's probably most important for the group tonight is to know that we are working hard to provide community benefits and commit to those in a community benefits agreement, but also in a number of other documents with the city. Some of those things include affordable housing on the site, a proposed Globeville stabilization fund that will help with displacement pressures in all of Globeville, free and reduced space rent in the community center for whatever uses the community thinks is the best for that. We'll run a process with the community to help us think about that. It could be commercial kitchen, it could be something else. We want to make sure that we're helping economic development for everybody through that space. We've also announced a partnership with Denver Botanic Gardens. They're very excited to have the opportunity to be in Globeville. They are going to help us. The first thing they'll work with us on is planting trees at the site to incubate them as a tree nursery, and we'll use those on the site, but we also intend to give those away for free to the neighborhood. And then as you were speaking earlier about infrastructure improvements, this project will also build 3 major improvements for infrastructure. One is a bridge to the west to Sunnyside. One is a connection down by 38th and Huron for emergency vehicles, and the other is improvements to the current 44th Avenue bridge that will add the ability to have safe pedestrian and bicycle access on 44th Avenue. So we are just at the beginning of this process. We are asking for tax increment finance and intend hopefully to be talking to City Council about that at the end of the year. So we have many months to talk with you all and hear more from you, your thoughts on this project. For more information, you can email info@foxpark.com. And LG, I think you got a different email from Kathleen today. We can show that on the screen as well for folks who want more information. But we have a website, and it's foxpark.com, and there's an email address there as well. That's info@foxpark.com for any questions. And I'm available for as long as LJ lets me to answer questions.
Great. We've got 5 minutes of time for questions. Thank you for keeping that concise, Kim. One question we did get through the chat as you were talking was about something that everyone here in Globeville is always thinking about, which is access to food, grocery stores. Is any component of food service available in your planned site?
So I am told by Jose and Manuel that they also have interest in trying to bring food to the site. We have also heard rumor of another developer who may be doing that. So we don't want to both be doing it. So we have heard that loud and clear from the community. We think it's something that makes a lot of sense. We just need to make sure that we don't, duplicate efforts. So that's something that when we come back maybe and talk with you guys again, that hopefully we could have a little more information about.
Great, thanks. Just a reminder, if you have questions for Kim around the Fox Park site, please put them into the chat. Looks like Dominique raised his hand. Dominique, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, well, it's
Hey, Dominique, I'm sorry, we can barely hear you. Can you maybe try speaking up or bringing the mic
this
closer to
better?
your mouth?
Is this better?
That's better, yes, thank you.
Okay, all right. So, I mean, my question is I know that you guys have all these projects lined up, and it's very important to have these, necessities. Again, not amenities, but that's the necessity. But I see all these, projects going up, and I do not see in one a grocery store. And that's a very basic thing here. We have a lot of children in this area that don't have the proper nutrition, have to depend on, I guess, charity pretty much just to get basic food. So, like, is there some way we can make sure that there is, some priority to that within these projects?
Yeah, so for those that couldn't hear, Dominique was kind of restating the need for a grocery store in this community and how our children don't have access to fresh, healthy food. So Kim touched on that a little bit, basically said that the Fox Park group is interested in that. They just want to make sure they're not duplicating efforts with another development that's happening right now. Kim, just for the sake of the residents, because we're always being told these things are coming, but it feels like they never come. If you did get a grocery store at Fox Park, what would be the timeline for that? How soon would we see that open?
So that's probably maybe a little outside of my expertise. What I can tell you is that this project itself will take many years to build. It's 41 acres, so it's not something where you'll see just the building go up and then we're done. The hope is for the project to begin some demolition and environmental remediation late this year or early next year. And then there's at least a 5 to 7 year build out. So I'm not certain if the grocery store would be in phase 1, which is mostly the rehabilitation of the post building, and then also apartments to the south. But when we have Manuel and Jose, I think they are better suited to answer sort of more specifically about what that timeline might look like and if they've had any discussions with grocers yet.
Great, thank you. And I want to highlight something that came in through the chat too. The Birdseed Collective does run healthy food distributions from their center on Mondays from 3 to 4 p.m. That's the center on 45th Street in Grant, I believe. I also know that the Grow House in the Elyria Swansea neighborhood now does deliveries all over 80216 and gives significant discounts if you're in our zip code. So those are options to at least buy us some time until we get a grocery store in our neighborhood. There was one question about connectivity, Kim, wondering if you're going to be building any connections over to Pecos.
I do not believe there are connections directly to Pecos. I believe from this site, Pecos is west of the railroad tracks. We will be building a bridge that goes center at the north part of the site over the railroad tracks to connect to Sunnyside. And then I'm not certain though that there's a plan for direct connection to Pecos, but there will be an additional bridge built over the railroad tracks to Sunnyside.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Kim, for stepping in for Manuel and giving us this information. If you do have additional questions, about Fox Park, you're welcome to reach out to these email addresses, as well as the one she gave, which is info@foxpark.com. Did I get that right, Kim? Excellent.
That's correct.
And for our next speaker, we're going to be hearing from Ari Stutz of Wolf Stutz Investment. He is the owner of the Salvation Army site, and he's going to be talking a little bit about the ideas that he has for that, as well as getting the public feedback. So go ahead, Ari.
Thanks, LJ. Can everybody hear me? Great. I am actually currently in the car to pick up my children. And I'm about 2 minutes from where I need to be, and I can turn on my camera when I get there. But I wanted to introduce myself. My name's Ari Stutz. Back in June of 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, we closed on the Salvation Army site, which is about 4.5 acres of land with 90,000 square feet of buildings, more or less, that sit on them, most of them being industrial warehouse buildings dating back to the 1940s and 50s, and have had various uses. But you guys in the community have probably all experienced the only use, most likely, is the Salvation Army, who's been there since the early 1969. So, and the Salvation Army was running an adult drug and alcohol rehab for men. They had about 100 people living on site there. And then the people that lived there also worked in the warehouse buildings. And then there was various medical support and office support there. So I'm not exactly sure how much engagement the Salvation Army had with the community there. But we have purchased that facility, and we're looking forward to repurposing the buildings. What my partner Ken and I primarily do are redevelop existing buildings. Very little new construction, although that site could potentially accommodate new construction. But I am very interested in getting some input from the city. We are working with an architecture firm called Trace Bird's Workshop, and some of those people have reached out.
Ari, it looks like you accidentally muted yourself. If you'll make sure you unmute yourself there.
Sorry about that. Is that better?
Yeah, we hear you now.
And did you get video?
Yes, we do have your video now.
Hello. So we did hear loud and clear from some initial community outreach that we did about the need for a grocery store. And while I don't think our site can accommodate a grocery store, we certainly would be open to it if there were grocers that were interested. But what you'll see from us is most likely adaptively repurposing these buildings and trying to get businesses to locate there that can hopefully provide jobs and access to people in the community. We are hoping that that we can figure out what we think would be a community benefit that incorporates possibly something related for families, playground, and then potentially some music, cultural music and cultural food that relates to both the history of Globeville and the people that live there today. And actually, we would love for anything that happens in that regard to be businesses that are directly related by people that live in the Globeville neighborhood. So once we get some more ideas together around what that could be and how that might take shape and what the community benefit would be, we're definitely looking forward to reaching out and connecting with people. So basically, this was for me. We're at the very early stages of planning and looking at what the buildings physically can accommodate and what the zoning allows for. So we're really in the stage of wanting to get feedback and ideas from people and thoughts from people. So I'd like to turn this back over to the community and LJ to hear what questions or comments people may have.
Great, thanks, Ari. So in case you didn't hear it, Ari is looking for your opinion about what the community needs out of this space. So if you have a thought or an opinion about that, now would be a great time to put it in chat or to unmute yourself and let Ari know what you would like to see in the Salvation Army space.
Hey, Ari,
Hi, this is Gail.
70.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Hey, Ari, this is Yvonne with the Central 70 project. So definitely happy to help you with any connections, like right off the bat after you providing this information. I can think of some organizations that would definitely want to be interested. So I will definitely save your email, and I think that what you're doing is amazing. Great job.
Thank you. We haven't done anything yet, so, but thank you.
Even the planning phase, it's a lot.
Go ahead, Gail.
Hi, Ari. It was great meeting with you and getting that great tour of the campus. We would absolutely 100% love a satellite library there. It's the right space. It's been a meeting place for Globeville residents for years and years. You know, we met there to shop at the Salvation Army thrift store. So we would love to visit it as a library.
Thanks, Gail. I think it's a fabulous idea. The library reached out to us about 2 weeks ago, and they are considering other projects that were discussed on this phone call, even, or this meeting. And they do have some funding challenges, but we love the idea of the library. The library can bring a lot of community space within the library that could be an immediate community benefit. We've talked to them about several things, and I would hope that happens. I don't know how that process comes together. Thanks, Candy, for sending them our way. We appreciate it.
So just reading through some of the comments in the chat box for you, Ari, we have 2 people that are enthusiastic about artist studios in the space. We have 1 person who is suggesting having residents sell food there. So presumably food that they grew or made themselves. We have 1 suggestion of putting a horse stable for kids to learn to ride horses and to complement the Western Stock Show.
Are you gonna like possibly get something for like building apartments over there in that area as well?
The zoning does allow for apartments, and it does also allow for affordable apartments. To do that, there would be portions of buildings that would have to be torn down, or even potentially all of the buildings. We're not apartment developers ourselves, so we don't completely understand that business, but in any mixed use campus, I think it's extremely desirable to have people living there. It gets eyes on the site and people with, around an area that could otherwise be quiet and dark at night. So we would desire for people to be living there, but it's out of my wheelhouse in terms of building that from the ground up. We are looking at the building where they had sort of dorm style living for the drug and alcohol rehab, to determine whether or not that could be turned into apartments. If it could, it would be very few units. So most likely apartments would come from new development, and there is room to do that both from a land and parking perspective. So it's something that we would like to consider for sure. The site, just so everybody knows, is zoned IMX3, so it limits any kind of height development there to 3 stories, which I think is actually a bit of a shame, given that it's right up against the highway and could be a buffer for noise. But at this time, we are not seeking any kind of rezoning.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Ari, for sharing your project with us and for being open to your suggestions. If you have additional suggestions for Ari, please be sure to reach out to him. His email is ari@dpsdenver.com. You can also connect with us at Globeville First, as we are working closely with Ari to keep in touch with his process. and give him suggestions as we have it as well. So again, if you're interested in being part of our newsletter, feel free to click the link in the chat box or email us globevillefirst@gmail.com. I'd now like to welcome our final presenter of the evening, Jennifer Espinoza Garcia, who is going to be telling us an update on the National Western Center.
Thanks, LJ. Thanks everyone for having us tonight. As LJ said, I'm Jenna Espinosa Garcia. I'm the Communications Director for the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center. We are the city entity who have been tasked with the construction of phases 1 and 2 of the new National Western Center redevelopment project. I do want to acknowledge that several of my colleagues from the National Western Center Authority are also on the call tonight. So if you have any questions for them, please feel free to jump in. Of course, the authority has been tasked with programming, operating, and maintaining the campus once we're finished building it. So just as a quick reminder, many of you are already familiar with our program, but we are looking to be the global destination for agricultural heritage and innovation. And our mission is to convene the world to lead, inspire, create, educate, and entertain in pursuit of global food solutions. With that, we'll go to the next slide. Just as a reminder of what we're building, we are creating a campus that is roughly 250 acres, one that honors the past while celebrating the future. Of course, this future center will continue to host the annual stock show, which it has hosted for the last 100 years. But equally as important, we are building and creating year-round spaces for entertainment, education, and agribusiness. And we're really focused on building spaces that are flexible and able to program and activate things like concerts and festivals, farmers markets, things like that. And hopefully will be a great amenity to the Globeville community. With that, I don't have a ton of time tonight. So just going to kind of give you a high level construction update. We can go to the next slide. We actually just hit a very exciting milestone within the last week in that we broke ground on the first of 2 bridges that will connect our campus to the Globeville community at 51st Avenue. And, you know, we get a lot of questions these days about, you know, construction progress and what we're working on right now. And it's a little tricky because a lot of the construction that we are doing is very contained to our site and not always visible from the surrounding communities. So if it's okay, I'd like to take about 2.5 minutes of your evening to show you this video that is just showing some progress that we've made in the last year.
I'm going to run this, but Jenna, let me know if you can't hear the audio for some reason.
Okay.
Uh-oh. Hold on. It's opening up a new window on my computer, so.
No worries. It might be linking you to our YouTube.
Yeah, that's what it's doing. Hang tight and I'll bring that over.
No problem. I have it pulled up too. If it's easier for me to share my screen, I can try to do that as well.
All right. Can you hear that?
No audio.
Okay, maybe I'm going to give you presenter and you can show it on your screen.
Okay, let's try to do that.
Michael Hancock, and I'm proud to welcome you back to the future home of the National Western Center. Today marks an important milestone as we officially begin construction on the first of 2 bridges that will connect the National Western Center to its surrounding neighborhoods of Globeville and Elaria, Swansea. The 51st Avenue Bridge not only creates new multimodal connection points, but will also attach directly to the South Platte River Trail, providing a seamless experience for bikers, walkers, and joggers. And of course, will be within reach of the newly renovated 80-acre Carpio Sanguinetti Park. In addition to connectivity, this bridge construction plays a critical role in opening access to the South Platte Riverfront, a space that has been inaccessible for generations. We're removing more than 14,000 feet of rail. We're eliminating more than 1,800 feet of wastewater pipes. And we're creating 6 acres of open space for recreation, relaxation, and community gatherings.
Our neighborhood needs to have access to the rest of the city. Right now, we're isolated and bound by the river, railroad tracks, and the highway. And this is one step in making the rest of the city more readily accessible to the people in the neighborhood.
This bridge marks a major milestone in reconnecting to these historic neighborhoods and also celebrates the important history and heritage of this community. The new bridge will feature artwork from one of Denver's very own artists, the talented David Garcia.
Up top here is the Sun Bridge and then the Moon Bridge. The 51st Avenue Bridge is called People's Bridge of the Sun, and Betty Cram Drive Bridge is People's Bridge of the Moon. Rather than telling a story, this piece is going to be more of like creating a space. So it's like it's more of like what's the possibility for the future. And so it's about connecting people, activating the bridges, the spaces, the location, inspirational space that you can interact with.
As you can see, construction is full steam ahead here at the National Western Center, and we can't wait to share this space with you. Thank you to our contractors, program team, and partners for all their hard work in getting to this point. We can't wait to share what's next. Follow our progress on social media and at nationalwesterncenter.com.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. So yeah, as you can see, that was a really exciting milestone for us. And it's also something that we're extremely excited about because one of our very own local artists, as Mayor Hancock said in that video, is heavily involved in this program, and his artwork will be displayed and integrated into the design and construction of this bridge, of both bridges, I should say. So to give you just a basic timeline on construction, while we've technically broken ground, we really won't see any active construction activities happening until about August. And then there will be a slight detour to this South Platte River Trail in August and September timeframe. That should only last for about a month, we're hoping, so hopefully it won't cause too much of an issue. But then it's really in Q4 that we see a lot of the bridge preparations start taking shape with the piers and girders of the bridges that will actually hold the bridge itself up. And then the bridge landing will take place in the Globeville neighborhood in the Q2 of next year. And then of course the roadway paving and kind of finishing touches, sidewalks and so forth will go in Q3 of next year as well. So happy to take any questions you may have. I know, there's a lot going on the campus and not a lot of time. So happy to come back another time and talk about, have a little bit more of a comprehensive update for you all, but that's kind of the latest and greatest from our construction program.
We have time for just a couple questions before we wrap up at 7:30, as I know you all want to get back to your personal lives as well. One question in the chat is if there will be access to the slides from the presentation. Yes, we will post those slides out. I will get the email list from the organizers of the Zoom meeting and get those slides out to you. There was an FYI from the Birdseed Collective as well in the chat box, mentioning that they have a contract for one of the buildings at the National Western Center. And then there's some questions about, and this was actually my personal question, traffic from the 51st Street Bridge, and if there's been a study or if there's any kind of predictions about how that bridge is going to change traffic flow going into and out of that side of Globeville.
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that we get rather often. We have done traffic studies, and what those studies have shown us is that traffic patterns will likely be driven primarily through events. So as the authority starts programming and operating this campus, those traffic patterns will really kind of be dictated by the events that are hosted on the site. For that reason, we've been taking into account parking, which I know is always a hot topic, and it's a fine line that we're walking, because we want to make sure that we're offering plenty of parking, both with the parking structure that we'll be constructing, in addition to some flexible spaces that can be turned into parking lots. But in addition to that, we're a very innovative campus, and one that is really going to be encouraging folks to use multimodal opportunities to arrive to our site. So with the 2 bridges, we have, as Karen mentioned earlier during this meeting, we have bike lanes as well as sidewalks. So we're going to be encouraging those modes of transportation as well. But additionally, we are right adjacent to the inline commuter rail. So we're really hoping that folks utilize those opportunities to also arrive to our site. And yeah, I think,
very good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jenna. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I'm sure we could talk about that topic all night as well. If you do have additional questions, Jenna's email was up, or like I said, you're welcome to connect to us at Globeville First, as the National Western Center Development is something that we are keeping very close tabs on, and we have members on a number of citizen advisory communities to try to keep up with these changes as they are happening. With that, I would like to thank everyone for your time this evening. I know you're all busy people, especially like to thank our developers and our members of the city that came and presented their information to us today and took the time to take our questions. Thank you to our Spanish language interpreters who made this meeting accessible to people who do not speak English. And thank you to you all as well. If you have any further questions, please reach out. We are excited to connect with you, our neighbors in Globeville. Thanks and have a great evening.
Thanks. Thank you, LJ. Thank you, everyone.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.